Here's a quick disclaimer. On September 4th, 2025, Team Cherry would release the follow-up game to their massive success Hollow Knight, after delaying it for 43 years, called Hollow Knight Silksong, and it is hard. The enemies have much more complex patterns, the economy is the equivalent of living minimum wage for some reason, and literally everything does double damage, so much so to the point that the game actually got nerfed on release as it was apparently too difficult. As you can imagine, you die a lot in this game. However, what if you didn't have that luxury? This is Still Soul mode, a mode where if you die, it's game over. The ultimate test to your skill and understanding of the game, at least if you don't cheese it with the save quitting method to respawn after bench. Recently, I got 100% on this mode without the cheese, and this video shows how I did it. Before Act 1, or my playthrough, even started, I did many of the bosses hitless so I could learn them. In fact, I did all the Act 1 and 2 bosses hitless, and for Act 3, I just played them a lot to get used to them. My main goal for this was to get to the Citadel as quickly as possible while getting some basic upgrades on the way to have a better chance of survival. These upgrades included an extra mask, plasmium file, magnetite dice, and the fractured mask, all of which would essentially allow me to take more hits before death, and they could all be easily obtained in Act 1. I started the run by going to a secret room to the right for some quick shell shards, then progressed through Moss Grotto. Moss Mother is an easy fight, so I had no problems there. I also made sure to obtain moss berries for the wish. In the Marrow, there is a skip you can do with a beast fly to get to Chakra early, but I decided not to do this as I didn't want to miss stuff down below. The arena I had to fight is not that hard. I just made sure to be careful with the skull brutes to avoid double damage. Reaching Moss Home, I obtained the Silk Spear. It is the first form of range damage by throwing a spear in front of you, so I utilised it a lot. I broke this wall to get a relic and went down to activate this elevator. I also completed my first wish here, obtaining my first tool. This tool gives silk on damage, which is pretty useful and certainly better than nothing. I then started the Bell Beast fight. Bell Beast is not hard if you know the sound cues, but there is one risk. If you get forced to the edges of the arena, the boss spawning on the edge can be difficult to escape, so I made sure to return to the center when I could to avoid this. I did the boss hitless and obtained my first silk heart, which regenerates silk over time. I backtracked to Bone Bottom afterward to start some wishes and obtain things like a spool fragment behind this breakable wall, which increases the max amount of silk that can be stored if you get 2 of them, similar to how 4 mask shards increase your max HP. I had the option to get the Fractured Mask immediately by going to Hunter's March, but that requires dealing with an arena and a Scar Guard, both of which are scary with the limited items I had, so I decided to go to Deep Docks for Swift Step. Here also lied one of the mask shards I would get for an extra mask before Act 2. On my way to Swift Step, there was actually an arena here I forgot existed, which was scary but I was able to survive. I managed to obtain the Swift Step afterwards, which allowed me to sprint, which would be very useful for evasive movement. After another quick arena and attempting to buy something from Forged Auto with a craft metal I got from the Marrow being completely broke, it was time for Lace. Lace is a boss focused on patterns, and since I had done a no-hit for this boss, she went down just as easy as the others. I obtained the first Bell Shrine required for Last Judge, and entered Farfield to get the Drifter's Cloak as soon as possible. After obtaining the Warning Bell and definitely not forgetting about this breakable wall, I had a harsh reminder here that Steel Soul can go south quickly, as I got to 2 health with double damage hazards around me, but I was able to get to safety and heal. This is why you need to focus on not dying. If I were more cautious, I would have backtracked to obtain the Magma Bell before entering here, which is a mindset I would improve later on. For the wish, I let these enemies respawn their cores so I had to travel less, which slightly reduced risk. I also used this area to grind for Pilgrim Shores, which was required for a wish I activated earlier on. After completing both, it was time to get the Drifter's Cloak, giving me the ability to float and use these wind streams. I obtained my first mask shard of the run here, and went on to fight 4th Chorus. This boss had a quick kill method, but I didn't know how to do this, so I played it the way I was used to. I made sure to be careful for the RNG falling rocks, and it went down in no time, giving me access to Greymore. Went up for a quick backtrack to Bone Bottom to turn in the Pilgrim Wish and obtain another mask shard from the wormways. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough rosaries to buy the simple key to open the door, so it was time to continue with progression instead. I obtained 2 quick relics to sell later and went to Greymore. The Thread Storm could be obtained here, which is a very powerful silk skill, dealing a lot of damage to enemies nearby if you use it right. I first obtained the Hunter's Journal, which gives me a tool upgrade later on, before heading to Craw Lake for the aforementioned silk skill. The arena here was scary, but focusing on killing 1 Craw at a time and waiting for the right time to safely deal damage made it a lot easier, and I decided it was worth it to do this now, as the Thread Storm was so good, along with a bunch of rosaries I could obtain. Along the way I grabbed the threefold pin, my first red tool of the run, somehow, and got the Threadstorm. There is actually a mechanic with this that allows you to deal more damage by spamming the Silk skill key, in my case F. I could also access upper Greymore areas, which allow me to gain a few new stuff, such as another small fragment for a full extra bar of silk and another bell shrine. Before attempting Moorwing, I realised now was a good time to go get the Fractured Mask, which blocked one instance of fatal damage before needing to be repaired at a bench, along with other stuff I missed. Back in Bone Bottom, I unlocked the wormways by buying this key, allowing me to obtain some stuff, such as the Wanderer's Crest and the Shell Satchel, which increases the max amount of tools you can store by 1, which may not seem like that much at first, but there is another aspect to this later on that is insanely powerful, trust me. Unfortunately, the Plasmium File requires Cling Grip, so I'd have to come back for it later. For now, I started some wishes and headed for Hunter's March, collecting another red tool and the Flint Beetle wish on the way, along with other stuff. The easiest way to deal with the Scar Guard is to hit him when he comes out from burrowing, which allows you to go to the other side of him easily. I obtained another flea and went into the arena, which was scary, although the stuff I had gained helped make it less scary, such as the Threadstorm. After completing the arena, I went to go get the Fractured Mask. There was also the option to get the Beast Crest, but Savage Beastfly is a scary boss, especially at this point in the game where he can sometimes charge you in a way you cannot avoid if you do not have the right movement abilities, which I did not, and the crest itself was relevant for me outside the percent, so I left the fight until later on. Heading back to the Marrow, I did this skip to get a Mask Shard after another enemy arena and returned to Greymore to get the Reaper Crest and a Memory Locket. This gives you access to tool slots in Crest, so I used them on the Wanderer's Crest since I main it for its quick damage and wanted to use it this playthrough. I also finally equipped the Fractured Mask here. I returned to Bone Bottom again for a second Memory Locket from the Wish and obtained the final Mask Shard for my first full mask. I then fought Moorwing, who has a large arena which I utilised for survivability. I defeated him and went through Haunted Bellheart to get to Sherwood. Sherwood featured this arena, and the Splinter enemies were scary due to their spin attack that does double damage and can catch you off guard. I made sure to avoid being between them and quickly deal with them. After obtaining some stuff such as a flea and another mask shard, I did Sister Splinter to get the clean grip, allowing me to wall jump, giving me access to Widow, who I would do next, and the Plasmium Fire when Wormways. Sister Splinter I switched back to the Silk Spear to deal with the vines quickly. Widow was another pattern-based boss, so doing him hitless made the fight go down like a breeze, giving me the Needle In and Bellheart, where I did some stuff, notably getting a needle upgrade. I then went to Wormways to complete the Alchemy Wish, giving me the Plasmium File. This item allows you to increase your maximum HP, which can make bosses much less scarier. Also, since I was in Bone Bottom, I went to Weave and Nest Atla for Eva and the Moss Mother duo, along with another Mask Shard and a Spore Fragment. It was then time for Skull Tyrant, who had actually got scarily close to ending my run. It really goes to show how hard this challenge is, and why the Fractured Mask is so useful. I ran to safety before healing to ensure I would get it, and went to the Flea Caravan to rest at a bench, allowing me to recover and defeat the Skull Tyrant on the second attempt. After this, I decided to head through the Blasted Steps to reach Act 2 where I could get access to a lot more upgrades. I could pick up the Magnetite Dice here, a yellow tool that can sometimes cancel out damage, and with the Wanderer's Crest increases its critical hit chance slightly, a hit that does 3 times the usual damage, from a 2% to a 2.2% chance. Not much, but it's a good free side effect. These dice are the main reason I chose Last Judge over Phantom to get to Act 2, even if the cross stitch that the Phantom drops is also very helpful. I could also pick up the Needle Strike after dealing with the Great Conch Flyers, which are another pattern-based boss, they went down easily. There was also a Craft Metal here. Now it was time for the Last Judge. You can see here, and also in the Conch Flyers fight, why the Plasmium Fire was so useful. The amount of masks I had, combined with my good understanding of the fight, made this normally difficult boss pose little to no threat, and it went down, granting me access to Act 2. Act 2 was by far the longest portion of the run, so for the sake of this video, I will only be talking about the most important parts. I wanted to get as much as possible for Act 3, as Act 3 makes navigation a lot more difficult. The plan was simple: leave the scary parts of the run until the end so I'd have the best equipment for them, as many of the good equipment here, like the Cogflies, requires little to no bosses to obtain, outside the Cogwork Dancers to act as a lot of Act 2. The main areas of Act 2 I was worrying about were the High Hall's Gauntlet due to the Choir Clapper duo at the end, and Groll, a boss that I struggle with a lot due to the AI. Instead of going to Underworks, you can go through the secret passage to get straight to Coral Chambers, and pick up a free Spore Fragment on the way, so I decided to do that. I then headed to Cogwork Dancers immediately to access a lot more of Act 2, as they were a pretty easy boss, while grabbing the Whitewood key along the way and hitting the bell in the first shrine for Songclave. This game really punishes you if you do not minimize risk, as there is a safe spot on this fight, but I went with my gut feeling and tried to be more aggressive, resulting in me getting low HP, so I quickly resorted to using the safe spot to avoid dying. I defeated the Cogwork Dancers and headed for Whitewood to get the Injector Band, which speeds up the time to heal, along with the Clawline Silk skill. Also had an encounter with the hardest boss in the entire game. At this point, I finally learned from my mistakes and backtracked to buy the Magma Bell before attempting the lava section to reduce risk, along with Forged Daughter's other wares. I also remembered this ball fragment existed and progressed to get the Clawline in the Underworks, a very important item that allows me to do many things, the main one being making these hoops interactable, opening up a ton of areas, such as Mount Fae for the Fade Down Cloak, as the entrance requires you to use these hoops, at least without major skips. There was an arena here which concerned me as I died to it on the 5-hour achievement, but that death was due to being underprepared, so I cleared it easily. Over preparing is a very good strategy in this mode. I strongly recommend it if you try Still Soul yourself. I then headed for Mount Fae for the previously mentioned Fade Down Cloak, which gives double jump. This part is scary as you need to play fast. There is a freezing mechanic that drains your HP over time if you wait too long without light and without the Fade Down Cloak, or touch the freezing lake. Luckily the timer is somewhat lenient if you are used to this game, and you can farm silk from these enemies if the amount you normally get during the climb is not enough. There was the memory crystal here which I tried to get with the HP mechanic active, but then realised it was better to come back here later after getting Fade Down Cloak, which provides protection from the cold. I successfully obtained the item and went down to obtain a mask shard and a flea along with the memory crystal. After this, I decided to progress the story, getting the Architect's Melody before getting some pale oil of my second needle upgrade, and then heading to Sinner's Road. Read a few things. I freed the Green Prince, giving me access to Lost Vidania in Act 3, then went to go fight Lagoli here to progress the Great Gourmand Wish I activated earlier, that gives another pale oil for a third needle upgrade. This boss was simple, but the maggots can be very scary, so I had to be careful. I went to go speak to Skinks, a Steel Soul exclusive NPC, that trades Silk Eaters for rosaries, who replaces sticks. This will be very useful to buy all the expensive stuff later on. It was then time for the Mist, a pretty scary area, but I survived. Followed by Phantom to obtain Cross Stitch, a silk skill that lets me block and parry attacks. This is extremely useful as it gives iframes and allows me to escape near undodgeable scenarios. You also could get a memory locket afterward too. I then headed for Sands of Karak after getting the Mossberry for the Great Gourmand Wish. This area has some annoying platforming as you get little to no silk in these areas, meaning healing is difficult, so I decided to use the Plasmium File. I could get a few important things here, notably the Cross Nut for the Wish and the Volt Filament. This item increases damage from silk skills, which is very useful for dealing damage, especially with the Thread Storm. Also, I had to go through Volt Nest to attain this item, and I'm gonna admit the boss was less scary than the platforming was. The boss is very easy to read. I fought the Raging Conchfly, another pattern-based boss, to obtain this item, but more notably give me access to the Coral Tower in Act 3. After that, I went to High Horse for the Cogfly, a very powerful red tool, although I was not going to do the Gauntlet just yet. I wanted to save that for when I had Shackle with me, from completing her Wish Trail's End. I did make sure to open the shortcut so when it was time to take on the Gauntlet, I could easily get there from the nearby Ventricle Station. I then decided to do many side quests in order to upgrade enough for parts of the run like Bile Water and make progression, along with starting the Steel Soul Wish. This isn't required for 100%, but I wanted to do it for the exclusive boss and also get a pretty decent item. For a while, nothing that important happened until Trobio, the next boss I decided to do, to get the Mirror and the Vault Keeper's Melody, along with selling my Psalm cylinders for more rosaries. Trobio is yet another pattern-based boss, so you can probably guess how the fight went, as I had done a no-hit of it already. I was a bit stupid here and tried to use attacks, but they get destroyed by the tornado attack. Back in Hunter's March, I took on the Savage Beastfly to unlock the Beast Crest and, more importantly, Savage Beastfly 2 for the Mask Shard, along with dealing with this Scarguard arena for another item and a ton of rosaries. The Savage Beastfly fight did get a little scary at points, but it was nothing compared to what this fight was about to cause during the rematch. In the Underworks, I finally remembered this craft metal exists, which I could have gotten when I got the claw line. I then went on to buy the Architect's Key along with the rest of the 12 Architect's wares. The key allowed me to unlock the Architect's Crest. I then unlocked the Vesti Crest and immediately upgraded it, and then went to complete Courier's Rasher, and then to Greymore for the Vintage Nectar, both to progress the Gourmand Wish again. The Nectar had this enemy arena, but it was not too bad. I just made sure to deal with the enemies one at a time. I then headed to Memoriam and Putrefied Ducks to unlock the slab, but not before finishing the Great Gourmand Wish to get Pale Oil for another needle upgrade. Unfortunately, I did not have enough rosaries for this, as this one and the next one require rosaries, so I made the mistake of leaving it for later instead of grinding rosaries, which I would make myself do eventually, as this is a habit I need to get into for Steel Soul mode. Not much happens in Memoriam, but I did fight the big flea to unlock it. I never went onto the upper platform in this fight. It was safer to wait until it was in a safe spot to hit it from below. Putrefied Ducks is next, which was a scary area due to this enemy somehow managing to make the Primal Aspid look like a joke in comparison. I started the Brood Feast Wish here for Longclaw and obtained the key of Apositate to get the slab. The worst part about this was that the fact that there are barely any rosaries for some reason in this entire area, but I wasn't expecting this, so I went and got off rosaries and then had to go through the whole entire area trying to find enough to unlock the wormways, only to realise I was stupid and completely missed this one frayed rosary string. I did however unlock the Pale Lake and get a craft medal from this, but man, this got incredibly scary at some points. Oh, and I also found an unlocked vault too. It was then time for the slab. The first inner boss is pretty interesting as you can't die to it in Steel Soul. If you do, it respawns you outside the room like normal. I made sure to still check if this was the case on another save though, as I didn't want to find out I was lied to and would lose the entire 10-ish hour run because I was lazy to check something. Before first sinner, there was this enemy arena, but I made sure to make quick work of the Warden players with the Threadstorm and Vault filament. I also decided to finally grind rosaries for the needle upgrade before the fight. The best way to get rosaries, in my opinion, is through the Grand Reeds on this bridge. Although this goes away in Act 3 as most of them despawn. I obtained my third needle upgrade of the run and went on to fight First Sinner. Even if it didn't matter if I died or not, I still wanted to see if I could first try the boss, which I did. This boss is heavily based on dodging bullets, just like Widow. In fact, the entire boss is just like Widow. And I have a lot of experience with dodging bullets from my Undertale/Delta and no-hit runs. After this fight, I decided to take on Savage Beast Fight 2, thinking it would just be a normal fight. You probably have seen my shorts on this, but if you haven't, I'm just going to let this fight play out because this genuinely felt scripted, it was that close. Dude. Oh no, I might be dead. I'm probably dead. Wait, no! Come on. Oh my god, dude. This boss, bro. Oh my god! What? Also, going to answer a few things from the comments in that short here, I did not leave the fight, as the camera was fixed and I had not tried this, so I did not want to risk it. And I used Wanderer's Crest because, well, I was stupid and didn't realise it would cause issues here. Regardless, I beat the fight and managed to not die on the way back to the bench. I then headed to the Unraveled. This fight I had some creative no-hit strats, but which made it a lot easier, mainly pogoing repeatedly to avoid the enemy spewing attack. I also made sure not to underestimate this boss, as I saw a video of someone dying here from underestimating this boss, so thank you for this. After some side quests, it was time for the scary areas of the run, starting with Wisp Thicket. This area was very scary. All the enemies here are annoying and the wisps that deal double damage spawn a lot, so you do not get a break here. I picked up some stuff here, such as a mask shard. Power of the Flame was not too bad, but this boss does not give you silk back upon damage, so I made sure to be careful. Also, the boss has a similar explosion effect to the last judge upon death that deals damage, so I made sure to avoid that. Next was Bile Water, probably the most infamous area in the entire game, and for good reason, although I think Ducks is worse. There are maggots everywhere, and the jumping enemies are a nightmare to deal with. Usually just rushing through the rooms they spawn in was the play. This area also features Groll the Great, one of the main parts of Act 2 I was concerned about, so I didn't do him just yet. I also went to Fleetopia to obtain a few items from having all the fleas unlocked, such as the Egg of Flealia, unlocking Festival of the Flea in Act 3, and the final tool pouch upgrade, increasing the amount of red tools for the final time. After getting some things from Bile Water, notably speaking to Chakra for Trail's End, well, I went to do the Trail's End wish. This gives me a red tool which I do not care about, but notably allows Chakra to fight with me in the High Horse Gauntlet. It isn't the craziest thing in the world, but I will prepare as much as I can. After all, this is still Soul Mode, I just have to not die. After that, I returned to Wimbledon and finally got the second Skull Tyrant fight to spawn, which I've been trying to do for a while. This fight went much smoother than the first fight, also not to mention my equipment for this was way higher than when you normally fight him in the game. It was then time for the first scary trick point of Act 2, the High Horse Gauntlet. The plan for this was to use the Shell Satchel and the Plasmium to enter the Overdose mode. Remember when I said about the Shell Satchel having an insanely powerful use? This was it. You need 9 Plasmium masks to overdose, but normally you can only get to 8 of any crest that isn't the Architect crest, 6 in Plasmium File with the max tool pouch upgrades, and 2 from this Lifeblood cocoon and wormways. However, the 1 extra Lifeblood usage from the Cell Satchel changes that, so in Steel Soul, and only Steel Soul, you can enter Overdose mode of all crests, well, at least before Act 3 where more cocoons spawn. Overdose mode regenerates masks automatically, meaning you can stall and heal at the same time without Silk, even when under the effects of the maggots. This will be important for Growl later on. With Overdose mode, Chakra, and this strap sticking to the top of this wall so the choir clappers can never hit you, and using Chlorine for damage, the High Hall's Gauntlet did stand a chance and I was able to get the final melody. I then went on to do Lace 2 for the Silk Heart to progress towards unlocking Silken Soul. This fight I made sure to utilise airtime a lot as Lace mostly attacks on the ground. After defeating Lace, I went on to do Grandmother Silk. I didn't need to do this boss now, but I did so as that way I would get the 80% completion achievement, so even if the run died, I would have something. This boss got scary at points and also features a triple damage attack, but I was able to defeat it and beat Steel Soul mode. It was then time for Signis and Gron, but getting there was difficult. There are many hazards and these flying guys are absolutely brutal. I got pretty close to dying here, but I had to use the Plasmium File, so I had extra masks. I also played a lot safer and stalled a lot when my HP got too low to avoid taking any more damage, obviously, and read chat less. After the Signis and Gron fight, I went to open the way to the diving bell for Act 3. Next up was Summon Savior, the Steel Soul exclusive boss. I never fought this boss before, but from spoilers I knew a bit about him. I prepared for the fight and the boss went down. Like Father of the Flame, this boss also doesn't give you Silk, so I came in with a full bar of Silk as well. Also, can we just say that is evil for a Steel Soul exclusive boss? This boss already has a runback of like the entire game due to it being Steel Soul. Man, people say Growl is bad. Anyway, after the fight, I returned to Steel Seer Z and obtained the Grove Stone. An infinite shard bundle, but it takes time to regenerate the shards to be used again. Up next was Broodmother. Pretty easy boss, but the summons can sometimes be annoying. After that, I returned to Dux to hand in the organs from the Brood Feast wish, and obtained Longclaw, which extends my needle range, which is pretty powerful, especially of the Wanderer's Crest. I then started the Silken Soul wish for Act 3 and obtained the 2 items from the NPCs for this wish. I already had the Snare Setter from Weaver Nest Atla. I then decided to do Growl, the other scary part of the run, for the Seeker's Soul. I was wondering what strat to use for this boss until I realised something. There is a strat where you stay in the maggots to avoid most of the attacks, but the problem with it is that you can't heal. Until I realised that you can combine that with the overdose mechanic from earlier, and this resulted in Growl being one of the easiest bosses in the run. I am not joking, this strategy is completely broken. I also squished to Hunter's Crest here, so I could do damage easier. Anyways, with Growl defeated, I obtained the Seeker's Soul, giving me all 4. There was not much to do after this outside Second Sentinel, and gather everything I could before Act 3, including the Witch's Crest. No hitting Second Sentinel made me learn the best timings and when to deal damage, so there was no problem there. I went on to beat Grandmother Silk again, and beat Act 2. Act 3 is the hardest part of the run. The environment is a lot deadlier due to these void enemies, and it features some of the game's hardest bosses. Luckily, there are only 4 bosses I needed to worry about, as the rest can be skipped or do not end your run as they are Dark Heart bosses. Those 4 bosses are Bell Eater, Girl the Outcast, Pinstress, and Lost Lace. Seth can be skipped if you complete the other Dark Heart bosses, only 3 are needed for the main story and even 100%, and you can actually die to Seth, so I may as well not risk it. However, at the start of Act 3, arguably the hardest part of the entire run was about to show up. The intro sequence leaves you with 4 HP and no equipment, although abilities still exist, and your Crest and Silk skill is Hunter and the Silk Spear respectively. Additionally, you cannot heal until the arena, as you can damage enemies with Silk, and these enemies do double damage. I practiced this section by starting off with 1 HP, so having 4 HP would feel like a lot. I learned some strats, and with this practice I was able to do the entire section hitless, meaning it was time for Act 3 proper. I made sure to re-equip everything at the bench and Songclave. Bell Eater was up immediately, as I cannot use the Bellways without this boss, and the Beastling Call is also locked behind this boss that teleports you to the location of the Bell Beast. I think this boss is technically skippable, but it would be extremely tedious walking everywhere, and also more dangerous too than just doing the boss. This boss has 2 segments it can damage, its head and other thing. Anyways, I focused my damage on the latter of the 2 segments, as it was easier to do damage without trading damage, and the boss went down pretty easily, granting me the Beastling Call and re-unlocking the Bellways. I then spoke to the shamans in order to progress the story and unlock the Abyss. Before entering the Abyss, I completed the alchemy quest in wormways, making my Plasmium File a lot stronger, as now it only requires shell shards and doesn't require me to backtrack after 20 usages. I then tried to do Festival of the Flea for the needle upgrade, but I couldn't get it to spawn, so I just went to the Abyss assuming it was a requirement to get the wish. I actually still don't know what happens here. The wiki only says that all fleas are required along with the Egg of Flelia, which I already had. Anyways, the Abyss was not too difficult surprisingly. There was not much to do here, so I just made sure to outrun the enemies. I obtained the Arcane Egg on the way, along with the fast sight so I could see my percentage completion, and of course the main thing, the Silksong, which once charged up can pull you up to the ceiling. The escape sequence is pretty simple. The lava actually slows down the closer it gets to you, so it isn't as tight as it seems. After speaking with the shamans again and obtaining the Elegy of the Deep, it was time for the old hearts. I returned to Baleheart and went to accept some wishes here, and also sell the Arcane Egg for a bunch of rosaries, along with obtaining a quick memory locket. One of these wishes was Ecstasy of the End, the Flea wish, so I went to complete the Flea minigames to obtain the final Pale Oil. These minigames can be difficult, but you cannot die to them, so it doesn't really matter that much. I went to complete this enemy arena, required to re-unlock the needle upgrades, and then returned to Baleheart to actually get the needle upgrade. I then went to Eva to bind her, giving me silk regeneration at a bench. I then went through Hunter's March to get Disgusting and Carmelita in Farfields, the first Dark Heart boss, along with unlocking Gur. There was a quick enemy arena I had to deal with, but nothing too bad. Also, I cannot avoid this by taking another entrance to Hunter's March, as they get blocked off in Act 3 until you destroy them from the other side. I used the Silksong here and went through the Farfield section to get to the fight. This fight I had barely any practice in, as you cannot die to it, but I was still able to first try it. Like with First Sinner, I made sure to check if dying here or not ending your run was true to be safe with another save file. I waited to use the Plasmium file here until after the arena, as I didn't really need to waste it on the arena. After obtaining the Hunter's Heart, I went to Sprint Master Swift and completed his races to obtain a Mask Shard. Next up was Gur. I made sure to do the wish immediately after accepting it, as it makes the hazard spawn in Farfields until the wish is completed by defeating the boss. Also, it is important to know where the boss is so you don't have to track him down like normal, as doing this is a nightmare with how many hazards there are. The boss itself was pretty scary due to how easily it can corner you, but luckily using the cross stitch helps a lot. After this, I returned the wish for another Mask Shard and headed to Sands of Karak for Coral Tower, along with starting the Fatal Resolve wish for the Pinstress fight. Coral Tower is another area that doesn't end your run when you die, but of course I made sure to check beforehand like with the other areas on another save. The Coral Tower features a few enemy gauntlets followed by Cross King Khan, the second Dark Heart boss. I managed to not die to either of these as well. The main thing I did here was kill the enemies quickly. Also, I accidentally forgot the shortcut here, so if I died to the final gauntlet or Khan, I would have to redo all of Coral Tower, so dying would be pretty annoying here. I mean, it's in the spirit of Steel Soul, isn't it? After Khan and obtaining the Encrusted Heart, I went to fight the Pinstress. This boss I made a very dumb move. I didn't practice this boss beforehand, as I knew the movements of the boss anyway. However, this resulted in me taking quite a lot of damage in this fight, but I managed to beat it anyway. If you ever try this run for yourself, always practice bosses, unless you have done like a no-hit on them or something, but you can still practice to be safe. Otherwise this could happen, you may not be as lucky. Anyways, I obtained the pin badge. After this, I went to Los Vidania for the final Dark Heart from the Clover Dancers. This whole area as usual doesn't end your run if you die, and as usual I checked this. I didn't want to find out I was lied to and would lose the entire 10-ish hour run, because I was lazy to check. So the hardest part of this area was the arena actually. The bosses here are super easy, but I managed to beat everything here deathless too. It was then time to finish Steel Soul 100%. First I went through the red memory to obtain the Everbloom for Lost Lace. I did a final cleanup and practiced this boss, as this boss happens to be the hardest one in the game. I had practiced without Plasmium, and in the fight I would use Plasmium, so I'd basically be over-prepared. I managed to defeat this boss and complete Steel Soul 100% without using save quits to cheat. This was actually my first attempt of the run, by the way. Goes to show what you can achieve if you practice enough. So yeah, that is how I beat Steel Soul 100%, Silksong's hardest challenge. Okay, it's not actually the hardest challenge. There are things like no-hit runs and speedruns, for instance, go check them out. But from the developers it is, and it also makes a much better title than something like How I Beat the Silksong Hard Challenge. So sorry for the partial clickbait. I didn't explain everything here, as that would make the video last eons, but you can watch the VODs of my playthrough if you want. I might try in the future to continue this run to get all mementos of Steel Soul, but I am not sure about that, as if I die I won't be replaying the game very most likely just for this. Anyways, hope you learned things from this video for your own Steel Soul runs, and see you next time. Goodbye.